Title of this video is Monsters and Machiavellians, or maybe it'll be Monsters and Machiavellianism. But it is about the type of game that I came to enjoy because of a specific group of players at a specific time, and that is probably is impossible to recapture because it was just at that moment that it was that group was capable of doing this. And I'm going to give a brief rundown of what I mean by Machiavellianism. This is just something I picked up off the internet, and it's just something that was a list of 10 things that are Machiavellianism, and it's just from but it fits perfectly with what I'm about to describe. The first thing on Machiavellianism is manipulativeness. The second is cunningness. Third thing is strategic thinking. Fourth, pragmatism. 5, focus on achieving goals. 6, willingness to deceive and exploit. 7, lack of concern for morality. 8, willingness to use others for personal gain. 9, the ability to charm and influence others. And 10, a desire for power and control. Now, of course, in daily life, Machiavellianism is one of the dark triad parts of personality, of the dark triad personality types. Narcissism being one of the others, and psychopathy, I think, is the third. I'm not a psychologist, obviously, but in certain circumstances, Machiavellianism is not considered a mental illness, and Machiavellianism it can be useful in certain jobs, even in the real world. But when it comes to gaming, when it comes to playing a role-playing game, especially an old-school role-playing game, almost all 10 of those are extremely useful traits. We'll just go to the first one: manipulativeness, manipulating your enemies, manipulating your opponents. Is that something that you're supposed to do as a role player? Isn't the point of having parlay with your enemies an attempt to manipulate them, to get them on your side, or to get them temporarily on your side, or to deceive them into thinking that you're on their side? Yeah, that actually is a pretty good cunningness related, but obviously cunningness is finding a back door to a dungeon and getting it, even if you have to create it yourself. Cunningness is deceiving deceiving your enemies with tricks. It's also cunningness is overcoming traps in non-obvious ways. Cunningness, is, for example, I'm just using an example something that happened fairly recently in my background, although it happened years ago. You're in a room that has a ceiling collapsing with tile. There's ceiling tiles and the dome roof, and you're collecting and you look. There's tiles on the floor. Some of them are shattered. Some of them are still intact. You don't give much thought to it, but all of a sudden in the next room, there is a Indiana Jones style poison dart trap, and there are pressure plates on the floor. You find the pressure plates, and there's multiple ones, and you could spend the next 6 months trying to disarm all the pressure plates, or you go back to the room with the tiles, bring out the tiles, throw the tiles over the pressure plate, and move on through the room to get to the treasure. That is cunning. Strategic thinking. Strategic thinking includes logistics, but strategic thinking, obviously, you are thinking about the gear, equipment, what you need, the spells, the correct spells to choose, the correct spells to use at the time. That's also tactical thinking, but it's literally, especially in old school D&D, the spell book you have for your magic user what kind of weapons you carry as a fighter, when to employ and how to employ backstab, strategic thinking, of course, most importantly, outside the dungeon, outside of the obvious adventure situations, such as thinking how NPCs, such as city guards, thieves guilds, ordinary bakers or millers guilds can help you in what you need to do. That is strategic thinking, and much of the lateral thinking and outside the box thinking, which is the most important thinking you can do in the game, is strategic thinking. Pragmatism, super important. Pragmatism is probably the one that gets skipped over, and it's actually probably the one that is the most useful in every part of the game. But yeah, we can get that door open if I have a knock spell memorized. Or what if one of the party members decided that what if one of the party members has a crowbar? Let's be pragmatic. Let's not burn the spell when we can use the crowbar. Yes, it makes more noise, but it's a compromise. Being pragmatic. Yes, these hobgoblins are slavers. Yes, these hobgoblins eat children, but the illithids are the more serious threat. We make the alliance with the hobgoblin shaman, and we make deal with the hobgoblin warlord in order to stand up to the threat of the illithids. There's pragmatism for you. You have to work with evil to defeat evil sometimes. Focus on achieving goals, 100% a gaming thing, and a very important thing to succeed in almost anything in life. Focus on achieving goals. And those are obvious. The OSR style of play is built around that. It's the focus on achieving goals. The obvious goal being take the loot, avoid fights when possible. Take advantage if you have to fight on the most advantageous terrain in the most advantageous setting possible, and that includes focusing on achieving goals. Is also focused on doing combat by other means. If you can, I'm thinking of a time when a powerful character of mine traveled to the first plane of hell to negotiate with Tiamat because a cult of worshippers of Tiamat were trying to do me in. But my character was so powerful, I went to offer my services to Tiamat herself if she would call the dogs off. And she did, because my character was that powerful. My character was an impressively powerful character. Now, I can go more into that story in a second, because I'm going to talk about where I'm really headed with all this. Next, 6, willingness to deceive and exploit. That's obviously part of manipulativeness, so it's a little bit redundant here, but willingness to deceive and exploit is 100% a virtue in OSR Dungeons and Dragons. There is no time when deceiving your enemies is frowned upon. If you can find for me a line in the DMG or the Player's Handbook for First Edition, or in BX or BECME or OD&D, or even Second Edition, that is against deceiving and exploiting your foes. Kicking down doors and killing shit and taking their treasure is willingness to deceive and exploit. That's definitely exploitation. And deception is obvious. You want to lie to the wicked, lie to your enemies. You're going to lie to the goblins. You're going to lie to the hobgoblins. You're going to lie to the illithids if you can keep them from reading your minds. You're going to lie to the aboleths. You're going to lie to the dragons, to the demons, and you're even gonna lie to the rulers of the kingdom. If deception helps you achieve your goals, helps you to get that gold, helps you to get your whatever the objective is, which can be such things as getting a parcel of land so that you can clear it and become a lord in your own right, in and of itself. A lack of concern for morality, obviously, this is the one that stands out as being something that is not going to be an obvious boon in all situations. This one, I was going to say problematic, but problematic's been so overused. It can obviously be a problem. The lack of concern for morality. In a game like Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, where there are 9 alignments and good and evil are permanent moral forces in the universe, that obviously is not always going to be the case. Paladins cannot afford to have a lack of concern for morality. Rangers cannot have a lack of concern for morality. Even characters that are not forced to be good, like paladins and rangers, have to deal with morality. They have to deal with it from their alignment. They have to deal with it if they're worshiping a deity, and of course they have to deal with it in the consequences that if you exploit someone who is innocent in order to defeat someone who is guilty, if the innocent has some strong defender, well, obviously you're going to be dealing with those consequences. Perhaps the emperor, the king, perhaps some baron or something is going to come down upon you. And perhaps the game master is going to come down upon you because you've violated your alignment, or the gods themselves come down upon you. So that is, from a practical point of view, in the game, why a lack of concern for morality can be actually negative. But if you're willing to work with the Assassin's Guild, if you're willing to work with the Scarlet Brotherhood, if you're willing to work with the Zentarum, if you're willing to work with the Red Wizards of Thay, if you're willing to work with, Grimmel Wormtongue, if you're willing to work with, if you're willing to play a little fast and loose with the bad guys, and if your alignment is, lawful neutral, or if you're playing an assassin character and you're lawful evil or something, the lack of concern for morality can be definitely a way of winning. And since we're playing in a game, the consequences are not the same. If I decide that if my neighbor decides that he doesn't like the sound of my voice talking right now, and he comes over here and takes out his old AR-15 and lights me up, that would be bad. That would be bad in and of itself. And if I for some reason decided that I wanted to hurt someone for any reason, there are consequences. There are consequences also to my conscience. But in a game where what you're negatively affecting is the paper, is a piece of paper, like someone else's character sheet or some scribbling that the game master has on a notepad, the consequences are not that deep. There's no crestfallen little moppet who is going to be weeping because you did something harmful. I'm not talking about even fictional sadism. I'm just talking about stealing candy from a baby, or just doing your best Mr. Burns impersonation and behaving with the utmost disregard for the safety of imaginary creatures and imaginary beings who are innocent imaginary beings in the setting. So that one is a double-edged sword, and I would say, especially under certain circumstances, can be a lack of concern for morality can actually be a serious negative. And in real life, that is the most important thing about Machiavellianism: a lack of concern for morality. 8, willingness to use others for personal gain. Okay, that's straight up just textbook, the kind of thing you're supposed to do in old school D&D, and it's pretty much what you do in new school D&D. It's what you do. You kill the goblin, take his treasure. You've used another for personal gain. You manipulate. You use a charm spell. I did this one time as a player. I was in a thieves guild. My character was a fighter magic user. He was in a thieves guild, so he was not breaking into places to steal, but he had charm person as a spell. So he would go to merchants. I would charm them, and I would collect basically protection money from them. I didn't take too much, but I would take a little extra protection money, and the protection money was, I'm a powerful magic user fighter. I can protect your place from harm, but I need a little, zero interest loan. You don't mind that, do you? So, a little of your folding money, a little of your laundry money, a little of your petty cash will help me a great deal. And so I ran a protection racket in a thieves guild as a third or fourth level, maybe even fifth level fighter magic user. Before moving on from that town, I never really was in bad. I was in good standing because I kicked the money up to the guys ahead of me. If you've watched The Sopranos, you understand how that works. That's what I was doing. I was kicking my money up to the guys above me, and even though it was an all human thief organization, the elven fighter magic user was seen as being very useful, and no one questioned what I was doing. So willingness to use others for personal gain. So now I had connection to the Thieves Guild, and I didn't exploit that sufficiently. But I also later on, my character was not an evil character. He was neutral. But I did later on, the one merchant who I took the most money from, because he was very successful, but he wasn't doing bad things. I did go and just gift him a couple hundred gold pieces before the charm wore off, just to make sure. And it was way more than he had given me. But at the time I had used him, and had I not been able to get that gold to him, I wouldn't have cared. I just wanted him to be there to be used at a later date when I cast another charm person on him and he didn't make his saving throw. So, ability to charm and influence others. Well, yeah, literally in D&D, you can literally charm people with magic, and to use them, to influence them, to get them to do what you want. What do you think reaction rolls are for in BX? What do you think reaction rolls are for in AD&D First and Second Edition, BECME, OD&D? They have the ability to charm and influence. Super important, and if you're really good at it, and I don't just mean with powers. Also, I've used my ability to charm and influence others, both as a game master and as a player, to do things as I was playing either PC or NPC. I've gotten NPCs to get the party to do the bidding of a pretty wicked guy numerous times, just because I came across as very believable and charming, and the party. There's a lot of players who have a tendency to just believe what the DM says, even when he's talking through an NPC. So I've used that to manipulate the players into not, after a while it does create a certain amount of paranoia for them, but I try not to overdo it so they never trust NPCs. But there's a healthy, there quickly in my games becomes a healthy skepticism about what NPCs say. Last, a desire for power and control. Well, what happens when you get to be a ninth level fighter in AD&D? You get a castle, you get land, you get followers. What happens when you're turned to be an eighth? I think it's an eighth or ninth level cleric in AD&D. Well, you get a temple, you get followers. Magic users can build towers and such too. They can always get apprentices. Thieves get their own little thieves guild, their own little street gang to dominate. Rangers start getting cool followers, animals, and other animal followers. Plus, they get you know humanoid, demi-human, human and demi-human followers. Assassins, 15. If your character makes it to 15th level and slays the previous grandfather of assassins, he's a 15th level assassin, and he is the grandfather of assassins for your world. The desire for power control is basically OSR Dungeons and Dragons. OSR Dungeon and Dragon is a will to power, to use a term that many people don't quite fully understand, but the will to power is Dungeons and Dragons. So Machiavellianism, in general, is not such a dark thing in fantasy role playing, especially in OSR. OSR is built kind of around Machiavellianism, I would say. Everything but the lack of concern for morality is pretty much 100% in concert with your standard D&D game. However, it's obvious. Everything I just said here is obvious. The Machiavellianism is the way you play. It's the way you play OSR games. It's the way you play. It's the way, even a Call of Cthulhu game. There are times where it's good to be a pragmatic investigator. Sometimes you just can't kill every single cult of Azathoth, cult of Yog-Sothoth that exists. You can't. You can't just wipe them out. You can't just walk in with Tommy guns and light up every bootlegger who has a who you can think might be agents working for the Migo. If the fungi from Yoggoth seem to have control over a bootlegger gang, you can't light them up. You can't just light them up. You have to be pragmatic. You might have to find a member of the gang to take out the boss while you deal with the threat of the brain-removing fungi from Yoggoth. So, everything, that's all cool, especially if I start talking about, using these Machiavellian tactics against monsters, NPCs, even against neutral and good NPCs, fairly uncontroversial, I think. However, what if you start using these things against your fellow players? Is that a little more controversial? I think that's a lot more controversial. In fact, I think, from my experience, you'll get a lot of pushback from this. And however, having just said that, using against your fellow players is when it's the most fun. So, and that is something that I learned back in the fall of 1990 when I first started playing with a new group of players. I was DMing in the last few years of high school. First edition first, and then second edition, because second edition came out right before my senior year of high school, I believe. Yeah, It was in 1989. I believe it came out in the summer of '89, which would have been right before I went to my senior year of high school. So I ran the first edition game, then I ran more or less a hybrid second edition game because one of the guys who I gamed with wanted to play an assassin, and obviously those weren't in second edition. So I was like, fine, play an assassin. But that's not the guy who used Machiavellianism against his fellow players. He just liked the idea of being an assassin. He thought it looked. He just wanted to dress goth and be a tough loner type guy. But he was not Machiavellian. He was just, he's just a regular player. One of the players in that group, though, a guy named Chris, he was always a little touchy with his characters. He was always willing to go to the mat if he felt his character was insulted, and he would take insult at almost anything. And as a DM, I would be like, no, you can't, no, you can't use violence against your fellow adventurer. That's not the way D&D is played. We all know that. We all know that's not the way D&D is played. So, but he would be ready for it. He would always be ready. He would always try and push it. And I'd always step in and go, no. So I quit running right about the time people were going off to college. And I was, to some degree, kind of losing interest in Dungeons and Dragons. I was like, maybe I'll take my schoolwork a little more seriously. And then Chris calls me and told me that, he told me and another friend that he was playing with this new group of players. They'd gone to the same school as us, but me and Chris had never interacted with them before. This was Chris's first time, and he said the group was awesome and they were a lot of fun. And the other friend of mine who interacted with them was not as enthusiastic, but it didn't matter. I went, and the first session, my eyes were open to a whole different style of gameplay. It fit much more with Chris's style. Chris, this was a game where but the DM didn't intervene if two characters decided to go at it for whatever reason. They were in charge of their characters. It was their characters to go at it, and there was no stopping. If the thieves got ahead, the party was huge. I have to describe this. I go into this one room apartment in a bad part of town, where this guy named James, very good friend, is running this group. There's got to be 9 people in that little room, and there's a little table out with the miniatures for all the characters. And I'm not exaggerating. There had to be at least 15 characters on the table, 15 little miniatures representing 15 characters. And I was handed a character. I was like, oh, let me play a fighter. And so they had an NPC fighter named Kelson. He was an elven fighter. I was like, great. I like elves, and fighter magic uses what I want to play, but I'll play a fighter. I'll just play a regular fighter. And there was already a little bit of talk. There was a guy who would come in, and he would have there was talk about that he'd have a flashlight when he came into the room, and he would use the flashlight because he used the flashlight at work, but he would use the flashlight when he came into the session to look at everybody's character sheet. Everybody kept their character sheets secret, hidden to themselves. You didn't even always know what other people were playing, both race and class-wise. In fact, at a point in the session, a character died and took his true form, and the party had not known the whole time. They'd always thought he was an elf. Turns out he was some sort of shapeshifter. Technically, he was a Urda from Dragonlance. What he was doing in Greyhawk, I don't know. and the game had gone from Greyhawk, and now it was actually moving on to the Forgotten Realms. There were reasons for that in game, but 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 it but it was just funny. It was so when he died, no one had even known the whole time. He pretended like he was an elf the whole time. He was just pretending like he was an elven wizard. Elven, yeah, because that was a second edition. He was playing an elven mage. And yeah, I was surprised. At a certain point, all of a sudden, harm and violence broke out within the party. What they called at the time inter-party conflict, which, of course, me being a proper nerd, had to say, well, actually, of course, it's intra-party conflict, not inter-party conflict. It's intra-party conflict. And they continued to ignore me and call it inter-party conflict for many years, much to my chagrin. But it's just, I always called it intra-party, and nobody would pay attention to what I said. But, so a character named Junte, whose name also may have been Tejun, who was also called Mageblade, got into a conflict with a character who was called Feldrin Shadowspawn. No, Feldrin Shadowfax. Not Shadowspawn, Shadowfax. Who was a fighter mage thief, I think. And Junte was also a human fighter mage thief. He was dual class. He was fighter first. No, he's fighter first, then thief. And now he's going up as a mage, thus being called Mageblade. He had a brother named Sadine, who was a cleric of Tyr, I believe. And almost so Feldrin gives the party, we're in a dungeon party, there's a map of the area ahead. He's scouted ahead, and he shows the map, and a few things go by, and suddenly Feldrin has launched magic missiles. He's like a 5th level magic user, so 3 magic missiles slam into Junte. Junte goes to attack Feldrin. Sadine, his brother, uses an abjure spell on Junte, because Junte's from Greyhawk, and they were in the realms, or vice versa, whatever it is. And because abjure is a spell that if you fail to save, you go back to your home plane, that's what happened. So Junte disappeared. All right, so magic missiles happened. More things happened like that, such as the character Nightpick, who never admitted he was a thief, but who said he was a trap specialist. The party basically got a unholy sword off of a Death Knight, and of course a lot of party members wanted that weapon. I was advocating that we not take the weapon, I believe, or maybe I was advocating that Kelson take that weapon, take the unholy Reaver and turn to the dark side. But whatever happened, Nightpick said, I know how to disarm it so that it'll be safe. And he takes oil of etherealness and pours it over it and shoves it into the ethereal plane where it never will be found again. At least not by us. Thus unleashing another round of intra-party violence. And my character had the ability to unleash psionics. I managed to use. I don't actually use those psionics. It's actually my father's soul trapped in a medallion. Remember, this is an NPC. I really didn't know anything about that power until the game master told me, and I unleashed it, knocked out most of the party, and tied everybody up, and was like, "Hey, let's all get along, y'all." And immediately the thief characters break their bonds and begin. And immediately when that happens, I realize the error I've made, because now the thief characters have all the advantage because they're out and free, and I'm the only one out, and I can't really stop them without violence. So I basically free everybody else, and it was completely pointless. But I really enjoyed myself. That game was like a 7-hour session, 8-hour session. We were there. Finally, we faced the enemy, and a couple party members died on the encounter, including the guy who ended up being an Erda. There was a bunch of, but that was the beginning, where I saw how once the intra-party conflict stuff happened, the level of tension just kept going up. It's a different thing when you're fighting a big bad and the DM's running it. It's completely different when it's another guy in the party who's willing to do your character violence. It ratchets up tension. It feels much more personal. The game master, at least for me, the game master hurting my character might be frustrating that that I'm fighting the monster or whatever. But it can be but it's beyond frustrating because with this group they were going for the kill. If it came down to the violence, it was going for the kill. And that was the whole fun. Let's go back to that definition of Machiavellianism. So all 10 of those things got used as fighting for and against each other. We would manipulate. Manipulativeness was the chief thing. Cunningness, strategic thinking, pragmatism. Okay, I don't like this character, but I can't take him out now. We need him. Focus on achieving goals. There was always that. Much of the intra-party conflict was about disagreement over what those goals should be, and also the fact that personal goals were thought of as being just as important as any party-oriented goals. There was often a tendency to put aside these petty differences temporarily in order to achieve something in the game, but it didn't always turn out like that. Willingness to deceive and exploit, with manipulativeness, the willingness to use others for personal gain, desire for power control. Those were the defining traits of that group. And I would soon begin game mastering that group too, as well as playing in other campaigns. And we had the ability to go full Machiavellian, full dark traits against each other while maintaining friendships. And when new guys came into the group, they weren't cut slack. For some reason, when I came into the group, I was given a little bit. I have to admit, I was given some leeway. I don't know why exactly. There was some talk that Chris had talked me up, like maybe I was more formidable than, and they took, since Chris was talking me up, I think that made some of them think that I was going to be a player in this Machiavellian game right from the start. And to some degree that was right, but it was more incidental. I had to actually train myself to see what they were doing. I was often blindsided by certain players' ability to see what was coming before I did, and they were able to take advantage of that, just like which is classic Machiavellianism. Players would not share. They wouldn't share each other's classes. One of the guys would have. I know at least one player who had a completely false character sheet, and he would leave that out whenever he would leave the table. If he had to leave the table to piss, his character sheet that he left out was false. Now, That's commitment to the bit. That's pretty good commitment to the bit. Not everybody did that. Most, though, if some would carry their character sheet with them, but most of the time you would just leave the character sheet in a place where it was obvious if anyone went to fuck with it, because the other guys at the table generally would call people on that. That was going a little too far. But also, if the person who went away from the table was not particularly respected, the guys at the table were like, "Oh, he should have taken his character sheet with him. He should know that this other guy is gonna look at his character sheet." And so it was like covering up your home. Some players had their own screens to keep other players from seeing. Yes, they didn't always go that far, but it did happen. And like I said, the one guy, Rick, he'd take out his little mag light, look at everybody, look at your character sheet, just to get you nervous, just to get everybody upset and riled up and off kilter. So new players came in, specifically 2 new players came in, and they were treated more hard. They were treated pretty harshly, and no one treated the new guys any more harshly than I did. By the time as the new guys came in, I was like, yeah, well, get up to speed, start getting better at reading what's going on at the table, learn to read these faces of these guys. The guys who couldn't do that generally just mustered out and would fade off of the game, and no one would really miss them because the other players were so much more intriguing. What went wrong, though, is that more new players came in, and then they didn't have a sense of humor about this stuff. They didn't have a sense of proportion about it. They didn't have a sense of that it was just fun in games. They got upset. They felt like they were picked on. And to be fair, they were. We picked on them until they got the hint. And that's... So the Machiavellianism began becoming... went from being... It was still fun, but it began driving away new players as they couldn't adjust to this style. And so, inch by inch, we began backing off from it to some degree. But certain players could not back off from it. And they ended up driving away or just enraging these newer players. And the guys who were DMing, like me, would still invite the guys who were causing everyone to be enraged because, well, they were our best friends. So the Machiavellianism and monsters, Machiavellians and monsters and Machiavellians, something like that. That's the name of this video, because of that, everybody knew the rules inside and out. Because, well, you might trust the DM to play fair. You knew how other players were. And when if it ever came down to physical conflict, everybody had to know the rules inside and out, because you didn't want to get one of the guys who didn't know the rules that well to. If you didn't know the rules as well as the other guy, he had an advantage on you. It was just one more way he had an advantage on you. You needed to know the rules. You need to make sure he was using that spell the right way, that he wasn't misreading it. Things like that. One of my all-time. And there was the guy Chris, the guy who was in my group first and then was into this group and brought me in. Never lost in direct, violent PvP conflict. I can't think of a time where he did, at least. I remember he killed a lot of people, including me. He killed one of my characters in a session. I had no resentment against him. He took my character out easy. It wasn't even much of a fight, and he grabbed the artifact sword that I was carrying. It was an evil artifact sword, and so he didn't want to use it, but he took it off my dead body. It was just, but it was fun. It was a blast. If you've never had that at your table, it's unfortunate because the tension is fun. It raises the excitement. Things feel much more real. That when you're rolling that die to attack, to swing that sword, or you're rolling those six-sideds to launch that fireball, and it's going after another guy at the table. It's like playing, it's like when you're playing Risk, or when you're playing Axis and Allies, or when when you're playing any kind of confrontational board game, tabletop game, or doing, it's the person is right there. You're looking right into their eyes, and they know the harm you're trying to cause them. And some people can't take that. Some people don't like the competition. But the group I was playing with, we thrived on it, and then it just became too much for the new guys. And then as guys fell out from the group, everybody wanted to continue to have the PvP, or everybody who wanted to continue the PvP continued it and ignored the fact that a lot of the new guys were never catching up on it. They were not getting better at it. They're letting their temper get the better of them. The first 4 years that we were playing like that, nobody ever got into a physical altercation. We had I think one physical altercation later, but that's it. That's all I can. Or they had one or two. We had a handful, but that's going to happen when you quit reading, when the room quits being full of people who want that player versus player action. Anyway, but it was, and I would, if I could, I would have it back. If I could, I would have that where the players will do the PvP stuff. Well, they were, or one player will be we'll say it's in Forgotten Realms, where one character is a member of the Lord's Alliance working for, Kelvin Blackstaff, and another guy is a Zentarum agent, and another guy is a agent of the Red Wizards of Thay, and another guy is serving the Beast Lord, or the Kraken Society, the one of the Twisted Rune, or God. I would say the Harpers, but everybody hated the Harpers. I hate the Harpers. Everybody hated the Harpers. Joining with the Harpers was like getting a target put on your back. Same thing happened if you played a Paladin or a Ranger in that group. It's a good way to get the rest of the party to hate you. When everybody was pragmatic. So the PvP stuff was Machiavellian, but they still ran the rest of the game Machiavellian. Everybody wanted to play a neutral character. A lot of people played evil. The majority of the party would be neutral or evil. Be one or two evil characters and 5 or 6 neutral characters. And yeah, that was the general size of the party. 6 players, 8 players, 7 players. But James, that guy, I think 14 players, 13, 14 players is his largest. I don't know what my largest was, but it was probably close to 10 or 11, somewhere around there. Yeah, big groups. And so faction play within the party was a real possibility. And that was part of the fun too. And it wasn't always just, it wasn't PvP the way it would be in, say, a PvP server on WoW. You didn't just wait for the new guy to spawn and kill him. You didn't do that. It wasn't that kind of BS. You had to have an in-character reason to not trust or dislike the character, though that was pretty easy to gin up. And then also it had to be a reason for there to be whatever the conflict was. Some people had very prickly personalities, so it was super easy for them to find reasons to dislike everyone. But mostly it was about manipulating, getting things out of, taking advantage of the other guy. Um, Screwing the other guy over was much bigger part of it than was PvP. Let's kill each other. That was that was the last resort. That was the final. Though it did happen probably like at least a couple times every campaign. But these campaigns would last a long time. They last years with PvP characters, with PvP always being on the table. I never took it off. I still, as a game master, I never take PvP off the table. If two characters want to go at it, as the game master, it's not my place to tell a player how to play his character, as long as it's within the rules and as long as it makes sense. Um, yeah, I can't. I try not to. I am very hands off as a game master with what players do, and I appreciate when game masters are hands off when I'm playing. I do not want to be part of someone's railroad in any way, and I am ultra anti railroad in the sense that I will not stop PvP just because one of the guys that's involved in it is just uncomfortable with it. It's if the players don't want PvP, that's their rule, and they have to enforce it. It's not mine. I don't care. Or to put it more bluntly, I would prefer that they did if they thought it was important enough. If it's really important enough to your character that you need to strike down the other character or to betray him or to do whatever, then do it. Then go ahead and it should be on the table. Players, it will, but the problem is that character versus character quickly becomes player versus player, because especially in an old school game, where the point of the game is to test your player's ability, you'll also become the guy who, if it becomes character versus character, it becomes player versus player almost instantaneously. And that has been my observation, that it took an incredibly unusual set of circumstances. A bunch of guys who were a bunch of working class dudes who didn't see quite why that was such a bad thing, that you wanted to you want to screw over to, okay, I want to have more treasure than that guy. I don't mind if we defeat the dragon, and but he didn't really play a big role in it. So I'm going to use an illusion to knock out that character and his cronies, and we're going to loot the treasure. We're not going to take it all. When he comes to from the illusion knocking him unconscious, he's going to get a share of the loot. This just so happens that the 4 or 5 best items, the 4 or 5 most expensive gems, they're not going to be there for him. He's not going to get a chance to take those because I outthought him. And that's what happened. It's the kind of thing that would happen in those groups. And I loved it. I absolutely loved that stuff, both as a game master and as a player, though I was actually on the lower end of the capabilities. I usually was the diplomat. I usually tried to find diplomatic solutions, and I usually sided with somebody if in the party decided that guy was my guy, usually one of the better backstabbers, and be like, make myself useful to him, back his play, and try and stay in the background, let him draw the aggro while he and I shared the loot. That's usually how I worked it. So I was actually pretty good at the Machiavellian things, but if it came to direct conflict, I wasn't always that good at it. As a game master, I was always willing to give players backgrounds. If they wanted to be servants, they wanted to be members of a thieves guild or an assassins guild or Zentarum or the Red Wizards of Thay or any organization in any setting, Scarlet Brotherhood comes to mind. Yeah, just do it. Just build that into the background, builds it into the. There often players would go and serve temples, not evil temples always, few evil temples, but good temples, neutral temples. There were uh, bad guy characters who would go and serve lawful good temples. If you're a bad guy, it's a pretty good ally to have. Paladins. If you're a bad guy but not a baby eating sadist, but a morally questionable dude who might have some dealings with thieves guilds, who might assassinate NPCs and then secretly assassinate them, then bury them, and then dig them back up and resurrect them so they can lead your armies. But also to have a backup plan where you have a strong alliance with a lawful good temple. It's a pretty good way of working things. And that the intra-party conflict led to deep knowledge of both the setting and the game rules, and it led to new guys coming in who didn't have that deep knowledge, who didn't understand exactly how powerful, say, a spell like first level spell like Color Spray was. Color Spray is an extremely powerful spell in first and second edition AD&D. If you play AD&D, look up that spell and think about how useful that is. Up to 6 enemies, out, no save. Very useful against monsters. Extremely useful against other characters, especially when you're 5th level and lower. The other characters are going to tend to be your level or lower, which means they don't get a save against that spell. So we learned how to use ring every single possible use out of every single spell, out of every single situation. Yeah, I think it made for a very interesting game. Maybe I'm going on too long here. Going on way too long, probably. I didn't want it to really be an hour-long talk, and I probably lost everybody at the end there. But the Machiavellian thing, I'm probably going to do more on this. I'm going to try and maybe really write out how some of these intra-party conflicts really went down. How, both the consequences of the Machiavellian events, how, the tenor of them, how much fun they were early on, and then also how they often ruined campaigns, and how we lived with the fact they would ruin campaigns on occasion, and then eventually how they began driving people crazy who were new to this, or just got tired of it. Some players who were good at it quit wanting to do it, and it quit being fun to them. And when it quit being fun to most of the people, the guys who still wanted that sort of conflict and were able to dredge it up basically became pariahs. And I began trying to get the players who did that to quit doing it, and certain players wouldn't do that, and one certain player in particular wouldn't quit doing that, and he's completely ostracized from the gaming group because no one can stand to be around him, because his ability to manipulate disappeared, and all he can do now is irritate. So when everybody knows that you're trying to manipulate them, you can't manipulate them. Eventually it becomes a useless tactic when you're up against the same players over and over and over again. Manipulation quits working, and then all you have is but he didn't want to quit. He just decided that if he can't manipulate, he'll just irritate. And eventually that irritates the game master, and he gets kicked out of the games because the game masters want to keep playing, and the players who are being irritated will quit. So you kick out the irritant. And I'll try and go into that. I always have like these plans to do multiple episodes on stuff, but I really think these Machiavellian incidents might be pretty interesting. And also, I might try and get someone, like try and talk to someone, like get a Skype or not a Skype, but maybe some kind of video where I'm talking to one of the old players about these incidences. If I can get it on video and then post it up here, or maybe even do, maybe eventually do a live stream. If I have any kind of audience, I might want to do a live stream with some of my old players so we can talk at each other. And especially I want to talk about a certain set of incidences that happened at 2 different Gen Cons in 2 different years. One of them would be about how our play group style meshed with another group of players, some of whom had played before, some of whom were just random people at Gen Con, and also how my indecisiveness and poor planning caused a major happening to happen at the other Gen Con. In fact, on the way to the Gen Con, something happened, which was extremely funny, but in retrospect, extremely stupid also. But they'll go into that later. Anyway, if you made it this far, if you actually made it all the way through this video, thank you. Hopefully I'm not too boring. But if you didn't make it all the way through this video, obviously, I understood if the people who may have tuned out after a while. But if you do actually like this content, please subscribe and do like. And thanks anyone who watched to this point. Thank you very, very much. Goodbye.